Hello, Sam Switchtrack here with Charon View, and this time we want to talk about Little Railroad Chapter 3A Operating Modes. We are going to describe various approaches to operating this little railroad. And again, thanks to all our viewers and especially to those who have subscribed to our channel. Well, after thinking about this for a couple of days, we came up with 5 basic modes of operation. The first one we'll talk about is continuous operation of 2 trains, and that consists of 2 trains of maybe 1 locomotive and 6 cars each, and the purpose is to run them around on the layout and keep them apart by switching, and that's accomplished because you can see with this 6 switch track arrangement, if a train's coming on this leg here, it can come back on itself or back on this one or this one. If it's coming from either one of these, it can come back through the middle or on the other one of these. So it always has at least two ways forward. So yeah, it works very well. But it was a major part of the original design of the layout. But like a lot of things, it's hardly ever operated that way. One thing that did come out of that design criteria is that it led to a lot of operational flexibility. Now, this was probably inspired, the idea of running around two trains around and keep them from crashing into each other was probably inspired by that Man from U.N.C.L.E. Segment back in the 60s, where he's handcuffed to a bunch of switch tracks on the layout, and he has to keep 2 trains separated that are carrying nerve gas. And maybe by running it this way, you tend to feel like the guy did in the character in the segment. You can actually view it on YouTube. It's Man from U.N.C.L.E. Certain Death Scenario number 41. The next mode is running 1 train around the loop, another train back and forth on the other track segments. Now this one is quite a bit of fun. It gives some views of trains passing each other. We usually run the longer train continuously around the loop with transformer A set to constant speed, and there's usually a switcher and a few cars for the other manipulated train using B transformer. Now we'll talk about that more in depth. This is a schematic of the layout showing the track blocks. So if we want, we could run the train from 1 through 2, all the way through 3, 4, and 5, and back to 1 on the A transformer. And with the B transformer, we can manipulate a train on the inside using the varying the speed and so forth and stopping it. We could also say we can park it here and wait for the other train to pass, and then quickly switch this 1 block to the B transformer and run around through and come back in here before the train comes back again. So yeah, it's kind of fun. Plus there's other ways of approaching it. You could run it from here around, go through 7 and 8 and 10, so forth, and then you could have the switcher work in this little yard in here. I'm going to show how the block switches work just for clarification. The block switches operate, the middle position is neutral, the top position is the B transformer, and the bottom position is the A transformer. So if I take this and put it in here, now it's not connected to anything, it's a dead block. That's the A transformer, and that's the B transformer. The next operating mode we like to discuss is 1 very long train. Now some of our videos show that we can run a very long train and reverse its direction. One is O-Gauge 3-rail train layout, 24-car ATS of freight, MTH Protosound 1, QSI QS2 Plus, and also O-Gauge 3-rail train layout, PRR 30-car freight, MTH Proto 1 locos. When running a long train like that, you have to run it carefully because it can break in half if you get too happy making it go too fast and so forth. So train handling is fun with that. One drawback with it is that it ties up the whole layout and you really can't do anything else. So the longest train for varied operation that we like to maintain on the layout is 1055 scale feet, and it's defined by block 2. Block 2 is the longest block on the layout. So you could store a train back there and forget about it and just use the rest of the layout. We do have an operating rule of 2 inches on each side from the switch leg to store the train. 1 inch is enough for clearance so that nothing else will hit it. However, it's hard to rock a train back and forth if you're trying to get it 1 inch on each side, so we have a rule of 2 inches on each side for train length. So let's see a video of how long 1055 scale feet is. Now, one other thing about this 1055 scale foot train, it does reduce operating flexibility on the layout since it can only be stored in 2 places. It can be stored in block number 2, or a combination of 6, 7, 8, 10, and 11, or it might even be 6, 7, 12, and 11. And there is one other thing. It does not make it through the shortest reversing loop defined by switch number 3. So let's see some photos of what happens if you get too happy switching it and not paying attention. The next operating mode we want to talk about is switching, and that's a work in progress as there are still some bugs to work out in it. Let's just talk about some aspects here. One thing is you can't really stop the switch engine on the switch tracks because it usually stalls if you're not careful. So you have to plan for when you're moving cars around not to have the locomotive end up actually on the switch track. The O gauge, well, I think they're UCS tracks. They work all the time. So if we had more, we would have put more of them in, and we will do that at some point. We usually perform manual uncoupling close to the operator chair rather than worry too much about getting the train in the exact position on the uncoupler and so forth. Now, mixing K-line and Atlas cars can cause problems. The Atlas will coupler will close if it's pushed into a K-line car, but many times the K-line car will not close if it's pushed into an Atlas car. So if you're going to have fun with switching, you probably need to use all Atlas cars or all K-line. We did one thing to improve the switching quite a bit is the switch engine. This switch engine here, we made it so when the couplers open, both couplers open simultaneously instead of having that switch on the bottom where it points either to the front coupler or the back coupler. It's much better now that both couplers open. At some point we'll do a video on switching. The last operating mode we like to describe is multi-train operations. Now, this one is the most fun for us, and it's actually the one that's inspired us to make this series of videos on this little railroad. It's probably maybe a little more fun because it fits in with the design aspect of this railroad. I like to think of it as a junction with 4 roads coming into it. So it gives the feel of a busy railroad junction with train watching spots that we can sit and watch them go by as we manipulate them around. As I said before, the other viewpoint on this railroad is from street level, so it kind of blends in very well with that. Now, in order to set this up, some things just worked out on this railroad, and other things were designed into it. We're going to talk about the way it is now, not just every little aspect that was designed or it came out great. Now, the maximum amount of locos with rolling stock We use a spreadsheet to determine which locos and rolling stock to use at any particular time, and the maximum length is 1,963 scale feet, which is just over a third of a mile. And that's all we'll ever put on here because it fits very well. Now, we can show what 1,963 scale feet looks like. The amount of trains is 3 for multi-train movements. So here's the first one, and it occupies blocks 4 and 5. So it comes around here with its 2-inch clearance for parking in there, and it ends up over here. Second longest train is this one that's parked in block number 12. And it goes all the way over to where those U-25Bs are. The third train is the switching train with a couple cars on it. And then there's some spare cars here that we cannot use with multi-train movements because some of the trains will just be too long. Fortunately, the longest train that's used for multi-train operations does make it through the reversing loop defined by switch number 3, so we don't have that problem with it colliding with itself with these length trains here. One transformer is standby and one for operation. This is operating one train at a time and moving it from one place to another. And then after it's moved, it's parked. So that's why one transformer is standby. As soon as we park the train, we switch the block switch from A cab to B cab and just let it stay there. One has to be careful because lighted cabooses and passenger cars can bridge blocks and keep units operating. Or if you, anyway, yeah, you don't want to do that. Let's put it that way. Lastly, you always hope when the switches are set that we got it right. And following the rest of my talking here, I'll show some photos of collisions. The first set is where a set of train pulled by a set of U-25Bs rammed into a switcher and several cars, and it actually pushed it back about 4 inches. And the second set is of a more major disaster where it rammed into the train rammed into the back of another train. At some point, not at some point, but rather quickly, we're going to do a video of 3 train movements and explain more in detail what's involved in doing that. Okay, so here's the photos. Well, we hope you have enjoyed this segment on operations. Please stay tuned for more videos on this little railroad. Have a nice day.